Okay, so this is the key to section 10.5 part C, and on this worksheet you're finding the equation of a line with a given slope and that passes through the given point. And then you want to write the equation in both slope-intercept form and standard form. Okay, now I'm going to just go ahead and do the work on another sheet of paper. Okay, so let's look at number 1. Okay, so number 1, you're given that the slope is 6 and that it passes through this point, and you want to find this equation. So if you were to graph this, and let me just kind of show you what this looks like. So again, you're told it passes through this point. So if I were to plot the point -3, 2, so -3, 2 is in the second quadrant. And I'm going to use the fact that the slope is 6 over 1. So remember how we used rise over run? So given any point on the line and given a slope, I can find another point and then I can draw the line. All right, now remember the slope is positive, so the line needs to be rising. Okay? All right, so I'm going to go, remember rise is positive 6 and the run's positive 1. So I'm going to go up 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then to the right 1. Okay? And so I'm going to graph that line. And so this line right here, I want to find the equation of this line. So that's the idea. Okay? All right. Now, so again, what I did was to graph a line given the point and the slope, you plot the point first, and then from that point, you're going to use rise over run. So remember, rise is 6, the run is 1, because this is 6 over 1, 6 divided by 1. So you go 6 units up, and then right 1. And that's what we did here. So 6 units up, and then to the right 1, and then I graph it. And then that's what I'm interested in. I'm trying to find the equation of this line. Okay, so to find the equation of the line, I'm going to use point slope form. Since I'm given the slope and since I'm given a point on the line, I'm going to use point slope form. And remember, point slope form, so you can do that first. So remember, point slope form is y minus y1 equals the slope times x minus x1. That's point slope form. And then what you're going to do is you're going to substitute the values for the slope and the ordered pair. And you're going to substitute the ordered pair into x1, y1. So you want your equation. Remember, since this line rises, your equation is going to have two variables in it. It's going to have an x and a y. And so that's where this comes in. So there's your y and there's your x. You just substitute everything else. So remember what we did also was it's a good idea to label this point. So remember, this is to be called your x1 and your y1. And then you just substitute everything into here. So we're going to get, so remember the slope is 6 and it passes through this point. So we're going to get y minus y1, which is 2, equals the slope, which is 6, times x minus a negative 3. Now, it's a good idea to rewrite x minus a negative 3 as x plus 3. So I get y minus 2 equals 6 times x plus 3. All right. Now, remember, this is point slope form. That's point slope form. Right here. That's point slope form. Now, what I want to do is write it in slope-intercept form. Now, remember, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So in this case, you got to get the variable y by itself. So to do this, I'm going to distribute the 6. So I get y minus 2 equals 6x plus 18. And then I'm going to add 2 to both sides. And so I get y equals 6x plus 20. Okay? All right, so that's your slope-intercept form. So that's going to go here, y equals 6x plus 20. And again, make sure that remember the slope-intercept form, so the coefficient of x is your slope, which is supposed to be 6. And you see that 20? That means that if you were to actually graph this, you would notice that the graph would cross the y-axis. Remember, that's the y-intercept. Y equals mx plus b, where b is the y-intercept. It would cross the y-axis at 20. So if you look at this, so if I were to extend this further, it would actually cross the y-axis at 20. Okay? All right. Now, the next thing you want to do is put this in standard form. Now, remember, standard form is this. Standard form is ax plus by equals c. That's standard form. Ax plus by equals c. And so what you need to do there is bring all the variables to one side, constants to the other. And it doesn't matter which side you bring these things on. Okay, so let me go ahead and put that here. So y equals 6x plus 20. All right, so I'm going to subtract 6x from both sides. So just remember, trying to bring all the variables to one side. And let's go ahead and put the x term first. I got negative 6x plus y equal 20. All right, so that's standard form. Now, just keep in mind that someone else could have written standard form this way. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this over just to kind of explain where that comes about. So y equals 6x plus 20. And so you see how I subtracted 6x from both sides? Someone else could have said, well, I'm going to just subtract y from both sides. Okay, that's no problem with that. What you do one side, you do the other. That's the addition property of equality. Y subtract y is 0. So I get 0 equals negative y plus 6x plus 20. Then they could have said, all right, I already have my variables on one side, now let me bring this 20 to the other side. So since I'm adding 20, I'm going to subtract 20. And so I get negative 20 equals negative 20 equals negative y plus 6x. So that could be your other standard form. So when you write the standard form, there are two possible answers for standard form. Now, see how we got this one? This one's easier for you to see because you just brought the 6x over. So that'll be negative 6x plus y equal 20. So that's one of your standard forms. Remember, one of the properties of equality is a multiplication property of equality. So what you divide or multiply by one side, you do to the other. So what you multiply one side by, you do the other. So if I were to multiply the left side by negative 1 and the right side by negative 1, you remember you're going to multiply everything by negative 1. So negative 6x times negative 1 is a positive 6x. That's this right here. A negative 1 times a positive y is a negative y. That's this. And then a negative 1 times 20 is this. So basically what you're doing, once you find one of them, you can find the other standard form. So there are two possible answers of standard form. And if you were to graph them, they would be the same graph. It will be this graph here. It will be this graph. And so basically you're just taking the opposite. So the opposite of 6x is negative 6x is 6x. The opposite of positive y is negative y. And the opposite of 20 is negative 20. And so as you do the others, I'm going to use that idea. I'm going to just say, all right, the other standard form, to get the other standard form, and it doesn't matter which one you put, but to get the other one, you just take the opposite of each of those terms. Basically, you're multiplying both sides by negative 1. So the other one's going to be this. So the other one is, again, doesn't matter which one you write. So the other one is negative y plus 6x. So you just change in the signs. Oops, sorry, let's put the 6x term first. So 6x plus, 6x minus y equal negative 20. So there's the other one. Okay, number 2. So this time, your slope is negative 3, and the point is for negative 6. So let's go ahead and actually look at that line also, just to remind you how to graph this. So if I wanted to graph the line where the point's given and a slope is given, it's very easy to do. You plot the point first. So 4, negative 6 is in the 4th quadrant, so that's here. Here's 4, negative 6, right here. And then I'm going to use the fact that the slope is a negative 3, which is negative 3 divided by 1. So my rise is -3 and my run is +1. So from that point, I'm going to go down 3, 1, 2, 3, and then to the right 1, right here. So there's the other point, and then notice that the line, if I were to graph the line, it is falling from left to right, so the slope should be negative, and it is. The slope is negative. So remember, negative slope means that the line falls from left to right. So if I were to graph this right here, I am interested in finding the equation of this line. Now since the line falls, you're going to see two variables in your equation, a y and an x, just like you did here. So notice your slope-intercept form right here. The slope-intercept form, you had your two variables, y equals 6x, so y and x. And your standard form, two variables, y and x. Alright, so we're interested in finding this. So over here, this is what the equation turned out to be. So the equation here turned out to be y equal 6x plus 20. That's what this was. And again, you're not graphing this. You don't have to graph this. In fact, graphing this is not really going to help you because your y-intercept in this case is way up here, and you would not be able to have estimated that. Okay, so number 2, you're given that the slope is -3, and the point is 4, -6. All right, so let's go through this. So you're going to use, first of all, you're going to use point-slope form. So point-slope form. You substitute everything into point-slope form first. So y minus y1 equals the slope times x minus x1. So here's your x1, here's your y1. Alright, and then you're going to substitute everything in here. So you're going to say y minus -6 equals the slope, which is -3, times x minus x1, which is 4. Now, before you go on, make sure you simplify y subtracting -6. So you need to write it as y plus 6. So that's y plus 6 equals -3 times x minus 4. Alright, now this is point-slope form. Right here, that's point-slope form. So that's point-slope form. So now we're going to rewrite this in slope-intercept form. So remember, slope-intercept form, you got to get the variable y by itself. So now write in slope-intercept form. Okay, so I'm going to just go ahead and rewrite this over. And then, so to put in slope-intercept form, the first thing I'm going to do is distribute the -3. So I get y plus 6 equals -3x plus 12. And then I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides. And then combine like terms. So I get y equals -3x. And then positive 12 and a -6 is a positive 6. So that's your slope-intercept form. Okay? Slope-intercept form. Now remember, the slope is -3, that's what it should be. And remember, the 6 here's your y-intercept. So if I were to extend this, it's supposed to cross the y-axis at 6. Okay? Alright, now the next thing you're going to do is write this in standard form. So remember, there are two possible answers. Alright, always make things easier for yourself. It's easier to, since y is already by itself, it's easier just to bring the 3x over. So I'm going to add 3x to both sides. So I get 3x plus y equals 6. So there's your standard form. That's your standard form. The other answer you could give me is where you multiply both sides by -1. That's the multiplication property of equality. What you do to one side, you do the other. So basically just changing that, you're taking the opposite of each term. So 3x times -1 is a -3x. Y times a -1 is a -y. And then 6 times a -1 is a -6. So you have to do both sides. What you do one side, you do to the other. So there's your standard form. So on the blank, in the blank, your answers will be, slope-intercept form here is y equals -3x plus 6. And then here you could have given me 3x plus y equals 6, or -3x minus y equals -6. Okay, so see sheet for the work. All right, so that was number 2. Okay, number 3. Go ahead and do this over here. So number 3, you have the slope is 2/3 and it passes through this point. All right, so again, if you want to look at what the graph looks like, the graph looks like this. So to graph a line, you need 2 points. So you have this one, and you can use the slope to find the other one. So if I were to plot that point, -2,5, so -2,5 is in the second quadrant. So here's -2,5. And then we use the fact that the slope is 2/3. Slope is 2/3. So since the slope is positive, my line needs to be rising. So you remember that's your rise over run. So my rise is 2, so I'm going to go up 2, and then to the right 3. 1, 2, 3. All right, and then I graph that line, and I get something that looks like this. Okay, so there's your graph. Okay, and so we're interested in finding the equation of that line. All right, so number 3, it's going to be number 3 right here. So that's number 3. All right. So first thing you do is put this in point-slope form. So remember, point-slope form is y minus y1 equals the slope times x minus x1. So here's your x1, here's your y1. You substitute those values into x1, y1. And then this is your slope. So I get y minus 5 equals the slope, which is 2/3, times x minus a -2. All right, now rewrite this as x plus 2. So x subtract -2 is x plus 2. So I get y minus 5 equals 2/3 times x plus 2. All right, now we're going to distribute. Okay, so now remember, this is point-slope form. That's point-slope form right here. All right, now we got to write it in slope-intercept form. So to get in slope-intercept form, I get y by itself. So I'm going to distribute. So I get y minus 5 equals 2/3 x. 2/3 times x is 2/3. And then 2/3 times 2. Remember, 2/3 times 2. 2 is 2 over 1. So 2 times 2 is 4. And then 3 times 1 is 3. So that's 4/3. So plus 4/3. Then I'm going to add 5 to both sides. And then combine like terms. 5 and -5 is 0. So I get y equals 2/3 x plus, and then just use your calculator to kind of figure out what 4/3 plus 5 is. So 4/3 plus 5. So 4 divided by 3. 4 divided by 3. Plus 5 equals, and then some of you should know that, see how the 3's repeat? So that's really 6 1/3. 6 1/3. But if you did not know that this mixed number was 6 1/3, use your calculator for a second. P or B. So you can convert that to a fraction. And so you see you get 6 1/3. So that's 6 1/3. So 4/3 plus 5 is 6 1/3. But then you want to rewrite this as an improper fraction. So 6 times 3 is 18. 18 plus 1 is 19. So that's 19/3. So this is 2/3 x plus 19/3. So that's your slope-intercept form. And so if you look at the graph, if we go back to this, so notice your slope is 2/3. And you see right here, the graph's, according to this, the graph's going to cross the y-axis at 6 1/3. So it didn't quite go through those 2 points. See how it's kind of a little bit above? So this really looks more like 6 1/2, but according to this, it's supposed to be 6 1/3. So that's why it's a little off, because of this. So it's not, so you really don't always use the graph to kind of estimate the y-intercept, because it may not always be what you think it is. Okay, now the next thing you want to do is convert this to standard form. So remember, standard form is, let's see, I wrote it right here. So standard form is ax plus by equals c. So you're going to you're going to bring all the variables one side, constants to the other, and remember, in standard form, A, B, and C are integers, so no fractions. All right, so you see how we have fractions here? So we declare the fractions. The first thing you're going to do to put this in standard form is you're going to clear your fractions. Okay, so you're going to find the LCD. So the LCD here is 3. So you're going to multiply both sides by 3. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this over. And so I'm going to multiply this side by 3, and then I'm going to multiply everything here by 3. So this is more than one term, and put that in parentheses. I'm going to say times 3. All right, next thing you're going to do is distribute now. So I get 3y equal 3 times 2/3 is what you have. 3 times 2/3. And so reducing, 3 into 3 is 1, 3 and 3 is 1, 1 times 2 is 2. So 3 times 2/3 x is 2x. So remember, the whole point of multiplying by the LCD is to make these denominators 1. Is to clear your fractions, so you're clearing your denominators. Plus, and then 3 times 19/3, 3 times 19/3, 3 over 1, reducing, I get 1 times 19 is 19. All right, and the next step is to bring the 2x to the other side, so I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. And so I get negative 2x plus 3y equal, this is 0. 2/3 x minus 2/3 x is 0, and you get 19. So that's your standard form. That's standard form. So remember, the other standard form you could have written, the other equivalent one, is 2x minus 3y equal negative 19. So multiply all these by negative 1. Negative 2x times negative 1 is 2x, so you're just taking the opposite. The opposite of 3y is a negative 3y. The opposite of 19 is a negative 19. So that's the other standard form. So either one of these would be a correct answer for standard form. So number 3, your slope-intercept form is y equal y equal 2/3 x plus 19/3. And then standard form, you could have said negative 2x plus 3y equal 19, or 2x minus 3y equal negative 19. All right, so that was number 3. So remember, what we just found was that the equation of this line right here is y equals 2/3 x plus, that was 19/3, plus 19/3. All right, number 4. Okay, so number 4, you're given, let's see, number 4, where's number 4? All right, so number 4, you're told that the slope is negative 4/5 and it passes through this point. All right, so the slope is negative 4/5 and it passes through the point 10, 1. Okay, now, so again, you're gonna put this in point slope form. So y minus y1 equals a slope times x minus x1. So here's your x1, here's your y1. So you're going to substitute those values, the slope and the values for x1 and y1, into your point slope form. So y minus y1 is 1 equals the slope, negative 4/5, times x minus x1, which is 10. Okay, so that's point slope form. Point slope form. All right, now what you want to do is write this in slope-intercept form. So now you're going to write in slope-intercept form. All right, so you can distribute in slope-intercept form. So we get y minus 1 equals negative 4/5 times x is a negative 4/5 x. A negative times a negative is a positive. So, so we have 4/5 times 10 over 1. So remember, the whole point well, okay, so 10 over 1. So 5 into 5 is 1, 5 into 10 is 2. So I get 4 times 2 is 8. So I get negative 4/5 x plus 8. So remember, a negative times a negative is a positive. And then we're going to add 1 to both sides to get y by itself. And so a negative 1 and a positive 1 is 0. So I get y equal negative 4/5 x plus 9. So that's your slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form. All right. And then what we need to do now is convert this to, now you're going to write this in standard form. Okay, so to write in standard form, remember no fractions, so you got to clear your fractions. So the LCD here is 5. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 5. So times 5 times 5. All right, so I get 5y equal. Now I'm going to distribute this. Remember, the whole point of multiplying by the LCD is to clear these fractions. So I have 5 times a negative 4/5, 5 over 1. So the 5's divide out. 1 times a negative 4 is a negative 4. So that means 5 times a negative 4/5 x is a negative 4x. And then 5 times 9 is 45. All right, now to get in standard form, I got to bring the variables to one side. So the easiest thing to do is to bring the 4x over. So I'm going to add 4x to both sides. And then let's rewrite it so that the x term is listed first. So I get 4x plus 5y equal, this is 0. 0 plus 45 is 45. So that's your standard form. All right, now remember the other answer is to take the opposite of each of those terms, which means that you're multiplying both sides by negative 1. So negative 4x minus 5y equal negative 45. All right, so either one of those is fine for your standard form. So your answer is going to be for slope-intercept form, y equals negative 4/5 x plus 9. And then standard form, you can write either one of these. So it'll be 4x plus 5y equal 45. Or negative 4x minus 5y equal negative 45. All right, number 5. So number 5, you have the slope is 1/3, and it passes through the point negative 4, 0. So again, you got to put this in point slope form first. So here's your x1, here's your y1. So remember, point slope form is y minus y1 equals the slope times x minus x1. So I get y minus y1 is 0 equals the slope, which is 1/3, times x minus a negative 4. Now again, see how you had that x minus a negative? Always you read this as x plus 4. Remember, you change it. When you have x minus a negative 4, you always change this to addition, so you add the opposite. So it becomes x plus, and the opposite of a negative 4 is a positive 4, so that's where that comes from. So this, and also remember that y subtract 0 is just y, so you get y equals 1/3 times x plus 4. So that's your point slope form. Right here. Now you want to write this in slope-intercept form. So slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So I can distribute. So I get y equals 1/3 times x is 1/3 x. And then 1/3 times 4 is 4/3. And so there's your slope-intercept form. You already have y by itself. All right, now let me kind of, before we go on, let me just kind of show you what the graph looks like. Just so we're going to graph this just using the point and the slope. So the point was negative 4, 0. So remember, negative 4, 0 is right here. That's on the x-axis. So that's your x-intercept. And so you're given that the slope is 1/3. So since the slope is positive, the line needs to be rising. So I'm going to go up 1 and then to the right 3. So there's the other point. And so if I were to graph this, I'm interested in finding the equation of this line. All right, so that's what I want to find, the equation of this line. So you see how you really can't tell what the y-intercept is here? So don't guess at what that is. Okay, so let's continue on with this. Okay, so now I want to, well, actually now, okay, so the y-intercept was actually 1 1/3. See, 4/3, that's 1 1/3. So that's 1 1/3 right here. So that's why you really can't use the graph always to write it in slope-intercept form. Okay, now we're going to put this in standard form. So we're going to clear the fractions. So now we're going to write in standard form. So, so the LCD here is 3. I'm going to just go ahead and rewrite this over. So I multiply both sides by 3. So I get 3y equal, I'm going to distribute the 3. So remember, the whole point of multiplying by the LCD is to clear these fractions. So 3 times a third is 1, so 3 times a third x is just x. Plus, and then 3 times 4 thirds, 3 times 4 thirds, the 3's divide out, 1 times 4 is 4, so you just get 4. And so finally you just bring the x to both sides, the other sides, I'm going to subtract x from both sides. And so I get negative x plus 3y, negative x plus 3y, equal, this is 0, x minus x is 0, 0 plus 4 is 4. So there's your standard form. And so the other answer would be where you would multiply both sides by negative 1. So the x minus 3y equal negative 4. So there's your other standard form. So number 5, your answer is, for slope-intercept form, it's y equal 1/3 x plus 4 thirds, and then standard form, negative x plus 3y equal 4, or you could have said x minus 3y equal negative 4. All right, and then finally number 6. So number 6, you have, all right, you have the slope is negative 3/4, and the point is negative 8, 1. All right, and then again, if you want to graph this, to see what the graph looks like, so notice the slope is negative, so the line needs to be falling. So here's the point on the graph, so negative 8, 1. Remember, to graph a line, you need 2 points. Here's one of them. You're going to use the slope to find the other. So negative 8, 1. Negative 8, 1 is in the second quadrant. And you're told that the slope is negative 3/4. So remember, here's your rise. So the rise is negative 3, and the run is positive 4. So I'm going to go down 3 since my rise is negative. 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to go to the right 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's the other point, and then you would just graph the line. All right, so I can find that ruler. I lost the ruler. Here's the ruler. And so I'm interested in finding the equation of this line. Okay, so now let's go ahead and do that. So first thing we're going to do is put this in point slope form. So here's your x1, here's your y1. So y minus y1 equals the slope times x minus x1. That's your point slope form. So now we're going to substitute all these values into our unknowns. So we get y minus y1 is 1 equals the slope, which is negative 3/4, times x minus a negative 8. Now remember, always rewrite the x, when we have something like subtracting a negative, rewrite it as an addition problem. So this is x plus 8. So y minus 1 equals negative 3/4 times x plus 8. All right, now that's point slope form. What we did was write this in point slope form. Either this or this. Okay, now this one here, I'm going to now write in slope-intercept form. Okay, so the writing point in slope-intercept form, you're going to distribute the negative 3/4. So I get y minus 1 equals negative 3/4 times x is a negative 3/4 x. Negative 3/4 times 8, negative 3/4 times 8, and then reduce. 4 and 4 is 1, 4 and 8 is 2. A negative 3 times 2 is a negative 6. So negative 3/4 times 8 is a negative 6. And then finally, just add 1 to both sides. I get y equal negative 3/4 x. A negative 6 plus 1 is a negative 5. So there's your slope-intercept form. All right, and so if you go back and look at the graph, see the slope is negative 3/4. That's what it should be. All right, and see this negative 5. That means that the graph, if you were to graph this, the graph would cross the y-axis because that's your y-intercept at -5, and look, it does. Okay? All right. Now, we got to write this in standard form. Write in standard form. So that's where we're going to clear the fractions, bring all the variables to one side, constants to the other. Okay, so in this case, let me go ahead and rewrite this over. So your LCD is 4. So I'll multiply both sides by 4. And I'm going to distribute. So this is 4y equal 4 times a -3/4 x is a -3x. And then 4 times a -5 is a -20. And so now I'm going to add 3x to both sides. And so I get 3x plus 4y. Oops, 4y equal, this is 0. -3x plus 3x is 0. 0 and -20 is a -20. So that's your standard form. And remember, the other answer is where you just multiply both sides by -1. So the opposite of 3x is a -3x. The opposite of 4y is a -4y. And the opposite of -20 is a +20. So there's the other possible answer for standard form. And so now we're going to put these answers into the blanks. So your slope-intercept form is y equal -3/4 x minus 5. And then your standard form is 3x plus 4y equal -20. Or you could have said -3x minus 4y equal +20. All right, so remember this right here, what we just found was that the equation of this line is y equal -3/4 x and then minus 5. That's the equation of that line. Okay, so now that should take care of the key to worksheet dealing with section 10.5, part C.